We are on a mission to save and revitalize independent pharmacy.
On the Catalyst Pharmacy podcast, you'll get actionable business advice.
Hear stories from industry leaders.
And share a laugh or two with us.
Fuel your passion for pharmacy.
One conversation at a time.
4,
3,
2,
1. Ignition.
Welcome to the Catalyst Pharmacy podcast. I'm your host, Mark Bivins, Vice President of Sales for PioneerRx, and today I'm here with my co-host, Josh.
Hi, I'm Josh Howland, Senior Vice President of Clinical Strategy and Development.
Today our guest is Travis Wolff, owner of MedWorld Pharmacy in Sapulpa, Oklahoma.
Hey, how are you guys today?
Good. How are you, man?
I'm doing good. We got daylight here. We got a little bit of rain yesterday. It's been super dry for us. I'm excited to have that going for us.
Yeah, I think we had like
67 days
something like that,
no rain.
And then finally, like a week or two ago, it's finally started to drop. So that's good.
Our geography is probably not terribly different. Where is Sapulpa, Oklahoma?
Yeah.
It's near Tulsa. It's not very far at all.
Okay. So what, about 4 hours from here? We're in Dallas?
We're in Dallas.
Oh, yeah. 4 hours. Perfect. Yeah, we drive down there for sure.
Oh, right on.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, man, I think this is like 5th time's the charm.
Right. Yeah. It's going to be a good one. That's why.
Right. Sorry, you got the B team here. Jeff and Marcia are traveling, but you got me and Josh here. We'll do our best.
You know, you guys are going to do a great job. I look forward to the conversation. I will tell you that at Connect, Marcia's going to have a little bit of FOMO. She was a little bit concerned that she might not get in on this deal. Oh. And I just told her, you know, it was up to the powers that be, whether she gets to be a part of this fun conversation or not. So
I know. And in this case, literally power. I think the first time we tried to do this, we had a transformer blow down the road, right?
Yep.
Yeah, I think that happened. And then, you know, we had computer problems with technology and trying to get the right splitter. And then someone was very efficient and mailed me a new iPad, but none of the stuff with it. And then the headphones I had with the new iPad. And then after about a 30-minute call with tech support, they said, "Oh, I think we sent you the one that's supposed to be worked on instead," you know? And so anyway, I have this amazing, you know, like Pelican brief chest that I really like. And I said, Do I have to send that back? Because at this point, I think it's common law marriage.
Yeah.
I've had it so long.
Yeah, right. No kidding. My gosh. Yeah, it's been a journey, but you're here now. And
yeah.
You know, one thing I want to give some credentials out about you. I researched you. You're fairly accessible on Facebook as well. So I just want to kind of tell everybody kind of who Travis Wolff is, at least from a credentials perspective here. So I know you're the owner.
To hear what you found out.
yeah, I want to hear all of this. Like, well,
I want to hear what you have.
We may not have time to go through every bullet point. There's a lot here. I know you're the owner of MedWorld Pharmacy, but also you have 2 other pharmacies you're the owner of as well, right? Multi-store owner.
Yeah, we own 2 pharmacies. We bought 3, but one of them we combined under the same roof. So it's taught, you know, a lot. So we run 2 locations.
Okay, great. You've been pharmacist of the year in some flavor, like almost every year. So you've like almost hit all 4 majors.
They couldn't find anybody else to give it to, and I think travel plans played into it. You know, but I was fairly accessible on Facebook, as you said, so it was easy to invite me.
You're involved in Flip the Pharmacy, CPESN. You're also on the board of, I think you're a board member on the board of health in Oklahoma.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah, it's a very exciting thing. I you know how your phone will sometimes you get a phone call and it says maybe and there's like a name and you're like you don't have my phone book, so it says maybe Governor Stitt calling.
What?
And so of course I'm thinking this is spam. You know, I'm not going to answer that. And then they called me back again, so I answered it, and it's the governor's office, and I still have no idea how they came across me, but they were looking for an outside approach to how we can solve chronic disease state issues. And it's been quite interesting because I'm the only and first pharmacist to ever join the Board of Health. The entire board are physicians, and then one person on the board has to be a CEO in a major medical system. And so, but I'm the first pharmacist. So that, I mean, some people have been really accepting of that, and some people kind of wonder why I don't keep my mouth shut. But I think it's been good so far. So
Well, you're not there to keep your mouth shut, so
absolutely, yeah, absolutely.
Right. And then you also, I think you're kind of I'm going to call it a program director to a degree of getting pharmacies accredited to do diabetes education. So you basically do coaching there. And you also do consulting / coaching. I don't know what the term you like to call it, but around like, I'm going to say team dynamics, team engagement, how to get the most out of your team, correct?
Yes, that's right. And I prefer coach because the coach has actually played the game.
Right.
The consultants in the stands telling you how to do your job. So yeah, definitely coaching. And the people is the really most fascinating part that I enjoy the most. And I can kind of tell you how we get into that later, but people wasn't where I started. I mean, that's where I got to because that's what made the most sense.
Right. Okay, cool. And then I think the last thing I have, that's everything. The last thing I have is you're actually the owner of an elephant named Rojo.
My 7-year-old son is an owner of an elephant named Rojo. Yes, that's true. Yes, and we're going to visit him soon. So
Nice.
Nina is giving us the VIP tour. I think her quote was, "Your tour guide and your tour conditions will be better than a celebrity who comes from LA."
Oh my gosh.
Was what she told me. So I really don't know what we're getting into yet.
Man, just take photos is all I can say.
Yeah. We kind of toyed with the idea of going over there, and within a matter of days, I had travel agents from Canada calling me. Again, thought it was spam, and she has some special person in Canada who's been her travel agent for 20-some years, and they know all the best ways to get there and what airports to go through. And
Nice.
she just said they have a small child and there's going to be a need for overnight flights. And next thing I know, we're headed to Amsterdam. So
Okay.
All right.
I don't hate this trip. I want to
I was
tag
like,
along.
I was like, this went
Yeah.
from like talking on the couch to visiting Europe and Africa at the same time.
Right.
yeah, exactly. It's going to be quite the circle.
Are you going to just do a stopover in Amsterdam, or are you going to stay and hang out for a little bit?
No, I mean, I think if we didn't have a 7-year-old with us, we would probably
That's
stay
fair.
and hang out for a little while.
That's
But
fair.
Yeah.
probably in his best interest that we don't let him see too much while we're there.
Fair point. Fair point.
He's still having a hard time with not giving homeless people money. He's got a really big heart.
Oh man.
And so
I'm that
when
way
he
too,
gets
man.
birthday money, he wants to just give them cash on the street. And so it's
Yeah.
a hard conversation to have.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, my daughter did that. We were driving, and there was a homeless man on the side of the street, and it was Dallas, so it happens pretty often. And he had a sign, and she's 4, so she can't read yet. And she's like, "What's the sign say?" So I read it to her, and then she's like, "Can we give him money?" And I was like, "Dang, I don't have a good answer for that." So
You feel about this big.
You
you're like,
you do.
so now I have to. But yeah, you're like, great. All my kid heard was, this guy needs help. He wants money. We have money. So we gave a dude money on the side of the road.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome.
I do.
Not a bad thing for your kid to have too much heart, right?
Yeah, we take him. There's a little group that serves homeless people in a parking lot in downtown Tulsa.
Yeah.
And we take him down to serve in that. And, honestly, I think he enjoys it because there's a bakery that donates donuts. And so whatever's left over, he usually gets a donut. But
Yeah.
he does enjoy the people that are there too. So,
Hey, he wins too.
Yeah.
That's good.
yeah.
I do
It's fascinating to see people through their eyes. I mean, they don't see people the way that we see them. So I think that's good to take a step back and kind of have another view of the world.
That's true. Usually, I don't know. I know with my kiddos, you just usually get a more compassionate view. You get older, you get more jaded, I think, in general. But we'll move on to well. First thing I wanted to say, I feel like you're in a different status when you can say I own an elephant. So it's like I think he's gonna go giraffe shopping while you're there.
It was adopted. So
I know.
Ownership, is quite the term. But I enjoy giraffes. I wouldn't say no to giraffes. I probably need to watch out for my wife because she really likes cats. So we're supposed to see like the 3 biggest cats there while we're there too. So
that'll be cool.
hopefully none of those come home with us.
Well, good stuff, man. Well, one thing I couldn't find a lot on that I'd like to see if you can help me understand. How did you get into pharmacy, and then you owned a pharmacy almost right out of all of your college? So can you kind of just explain and help us understand how you got there?
Yeah, absolutely. So I actually went to work in the hometown pharmacy where I grew up. mostly because we were poor and needed extra money. And so when I was about 14, I went to work as a register boy, and I did everything. I would work the register. It's an old building, so when daylight was coming through the cracks, I would get the caulk out, and seal up the daylight. A little bit of everything, and then delivery driver. When I turned 18, I became a technician. And then in college, I actually was headed to medical school. I did an undergraduate degree in biochemistry and molecular biology. And, I think everyone has a plan. You can't really screw it up, but God just kept pulling me more towards pharmacy school. And, that wasn't what I had planned on doing. But I thought eventually I said, you know what, I'm just going to apply to pharmacy school because I could apply to it a year earlier than medical school. And I said, if I get in, I'll go ahead and go to pharmacy school, but I'm going to go to medical school afterwards.
Oh.
And so I'm going to do that first. And so if I don't get in, then I'll apply to both the following year. So I applied to pharmacy school. And really, that is where my passion was at anyway, going through pharmacy school and just seeing where the future of pharmacy was headed. I was, I think, overwhelmed by how accessible the community pharmacist is. That's another thing you got to kind of battle is in pharmacy school. They're pushing all these clinical skills and residencies and clinical pharmacists. And I'm all about, continuing education and residency. But I just think that the community pharmacist doesn't get the credit they deserve because in the very near future, the community pharmacist is going to be the extender of primary care. And you can see it in states right now. I'm having some tremendous conversations I'd love to tell you about later between the CDC and CMS for community pharmacists. I just think it's really the place to be. So I finished pharmacy school. I said, man, I really like this. I told my wife, I probably am going to go to medical school, but I'm going to do this first. And so we were headed out of the state. We wanted to have, a little bit of time. She's a pharmacist too. And so we wanted to get out of the state and go somewhere else. And then the guy that I grew up working for has just been a phenomenal mentor for me. And we had went to lunch, about 6 months before I graduated. And I just thought we were having, dinner as friends and had said, he's like, well, what's your plan? What are you going to do? And I said, we're going to buy a pharmacy. Well, how are you going to do that? And I kind of laid out exactly how I wanted the plan to work. It was a hybrid of several different models I have seen. And anyway, so fast forward a few months, I just thought it was dinner with a friend. And so he comes and just lets me know, hey, there is a pharmacy for sale in your wife's hometown. And it's been open for 30 years. They don't come up for sale very often. I know you guys are headed to the East Coast, but you might want to look at this. And so we looked at it and, we had always planned to own a pharmacy someday, but we didn't think it would be that soon. And so with his mentorship and with him as a business partner, it was kind of fascinating how the bank will actually give you money if you make good grades, even if you don't have money. So
interesting. Okay.
So we got a loan and we actually bought the first store. He was our partner, of course. We actually bought that store while we were still in school. So as an intern, I was coming in and managing technicians and, a 67-year-old pharmacist to keep me legal because I only had an intern license.
Yeah, you didn't have a full license yet, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So that was kind of the pharmacy story. And then I ended up just falling in love with the access to care. And of course, we're pretty progressive, so we don't just put pills in a bottle.
Right.
And just continuing to add services and just seeing how we could add our community. I remember that very first year when we started offering flu shots. We were the first pharmacy to offer flu shots in our town. And our town's decent size. It's about 20,000 people.
Okay.
We have nine pharmacies, though, for 20,000 people, which is a lot.
Seems like a lot.
And two of those are Walmarts. And, at that time, Walmart, they still were hiring nurses to come in on certain days of the week to give shots.
Right.
The pharmacy wasn't even doing it. So that first year, I was all excited to order all these flu shots. And I don't even think we gave 100 flu shots. And now we do thousands. But
oh, wow.
It was a game changer, for the community, for sure.
Wow. How'd you get to second and third or combining the 2 and 3? Or maybe you combined 1 and 3. I'm not sure which ones you combined, but how did you get to the second and third then?
Yeah. So we kept growing here at the first store that I bought, and there was a store not very far, just a few blocks from us. And I knew that the owner was nearing retirement. And so I had kind of reached out to him and talked to him quite a bit and just said, hey, if you ever want to sell, my wife's a pharmacist too. She was working for a chain. We didn't have the money at the first location yet for us both to work here.
Okay.
And so I said, we would love to have, the extra business to bring her as well. And it was hard because her whole family is from this town, grandmas and uncles and aunts. And so they're wondering, why is the hometown girl who we've all been so excited about to become a doctor of pharmacy not working in the store that you guys own? And we were trying to make it, so that I was the kind of the stand in the front, because we knew we wanted to have kids one day and she might not want to work every day of the week.
Right.
And so what was hard for her family is she wasn't number one in the store, and it didn't make sense to make her number two either. We needed another pharmacist, so God forbid we want to go on vacation sometime or have a family emergency.
Yeah.
And so we actually had to build the business big enough to hire a second pharmacist full time. And then we were positioned at that point to buy that second store.
Okay.
And we bought it and we combined it under the roof just because of location. It was a really decent business that they had going there. We hired a lot of their staff.
Okay.
And so, at this point, I didn't even have all the certifications in psychology and stuff that I do now. I was just trying to make, originally a staff of people who had been there for 30 years do new things, like give a flu shot or do an MTM session, consider a little bit of disease state along with the drugs. So I had to learn a little bit of employee engagement doing that. And then growing the store, they were in a spot where they didn't want to grow. I mean, literally, they would answer the phone the first week I was here. They would listen to the patient, put them on hold, and they would say, hey, someone's calling for a price on XYZ drug. They're not our patient. So I should give them a higher price, right? So they don't come here. And it's just like, I couldn't even believe it. So I had to change that mindset. And then I hired everyone who wanted to keep working from the second store I bought. The only one that didn't was a great lady who is still very good friends of ours, but she was into her 70s already and had told the owner of that store she was going to retire 10 years before, and she wouldn't retire till he did. So we bought that, combined under the roof. So now we had old staff. I had new staff from whenever we had grown, and then I moved the staff from that store into, and then the third store wasn't until about 3 years after that. And it again was a store that was about 20 minutes from me, and it was ran really well. The owner of it was really young, and so I just think she was pretty scared of DIR fees and stuff.
Oh, yeah.
So we bought it, and she's been wonderful. She still works there a lot for me, even though we own it. And it was a perfect transition because I had a phenomenal student who I had convinced to come back and work for me at the store number one. And she has an MBA and a PharmD. And so she had learned all my systems at store one before we put her at store three. And so she's a fit pharmacy manager down there, and it's been beautiful. I mean, she's very, very smart, very smooth, very efficient. But again, that owner that sold, I think it's always good to have a good relationship with whoever you're buying from. And, she will text me at, 11 o'clock at night to say, somebody forgot to pick up their kid. This really happened. True story. A few weeks ago, someone forgot to pick up their kid's seizure medicine, and she wanted to know if she could go in and get it for them, because I would see that she turned the alarm off and turned it back on in the middle of the night. And you can't beat that.
Yeah,
I said, absolutely. Thanks for doing it. I'm laying in bed. I don't want to get out of bed and go do that. I would, but thank you for doing that.
Yeah.
Right. So when you combined the first two stores, was there, what'd you learn from that, right? You brought two stores together who may have seen each other as competitors prior to that. So how'd that go?
Yeah. So, that's where I really first started kind of seeing the light to people engagement and just learning that no matter what you want to implement into your pharmacy, it's about the people. So the people that are working with you, it's about how you interact with them, the relationships you build with them. And, I'll be really honest with those three different subsets. I learned a lot about conflict management, and I'm actually teaching a really fun conflict management class at NCPA this year. And so I'm hoping I have a full house because I plan on using a lot of volunteers in the audience.
Nice.
Going through what I know now in that experience, you asked me about that. There were a lot of things I did and I didn't know why they would work, or I didn't know why they didn't work. I would fail too, but I didn't have the knowledge behind why that worked or why it didn't work. And we had been, combining them, but we had the original staff. I'd hired new staff that had worked at a chain pharmacy as we grew. And then, I had hired everyone from that store, and it was just three different, completely different mindsets that didn't know how they wanted to implement things and how they wanted to interact with everything from, the phone conversation to someone coming in the door. And, I just tried to take the best care of them that I could. But I learned a lot about conflict management. And, we did have a few blow-ups, and I didn't know what to do about that. And so, fast forward to now, you ask what we learned about that. We, with all that conflict, we kept adding new programs like diabetes education, and we teach COPD action plans, and we teach asthma action plans. We do all this in the hospital. Nice. Also here in town. We do heart failure education, trying to keep people out of the hospital. So doing all of that, it's kind of funny because when you go to any kind of conference, Connect was a phenomenal conference. You see it at NCPA, you see it at others where a pharmacy or a pharmacist has success and you want them to come and teach others what they did. So, that's where it kind of started for me was teaching, here's how you do diabetes education. And here's how we won. Outcomes MTM called me one day and said, hey, you're the #1 pharmacy for medication therapy management.
Wow.
And I told them that they had the wrong place. They needed to go back and check. I literally did, and I hung up on them. And they called back 20 minutes later, and they said, is your NPI this? And, is your NCPDP this? And I said, yes. And they said, no, I talked to you earlier. You really are the #1 center. So, oh my gosh, I about fell over. So we, working through all that, I was teaching that. And then about the third or fourth time I was going to teach at NCPA, they planned to call and said, hey, so let's go over what all you've done this year and figure out what would be most helpful for people to hear about. And so I went through, we did this, and we did this, we did this, we did this. So at the end of it, it was actually NCPA education team that said, I think instead of teaching about any of these clinical services that you're doing, I think that you're good at employee engagement and implementation. Oh. And I said, I never thought about that. I just thought I was, running around crazy trying to get everyone organized. And so that's where I really started, teaching on implementation, employee engagement. And so as I started teaching that, the outcomes were pretty short-sighted. I mean, people would do really good in the beginning, but it wasn't, sustained. And for me, as I was teaching people, I really wanted to teach them how to fish. I didn't want them to have to be dependent on me. And as a coach, that's what you're supposed to do, right? Is teach people how to play the game without you. They shouldn't need me. They shouldn't have to, have me, on retainer all the time. Now, some people say they're never going to do it without me, but I take no greater pleasure than to say, hey, I think you're good without me. Let's do it. Why don't you try it without me? Holler if you need something. But, in that journey, I had taken what I had learned from those three staffs that you originally asked about and tried to apply the things that had worked best for me and then teach people what not to do for things that didn't work for me. And then when those outcomes were short-sighted, I went back and got a teaching certificate thinking maybe I'm not teaching what I know the best way.
Okay.
And that helped a little bit, we got a little bit longer sustainability. And then eventually it kind of clicked. I said, I think it's all about the people and how do you get each person to show up their best self? How do we more quickly identify those that don't belong there and give them the choice to either join our values and get into that mindset or to help them find another job? It's nothing hateful. And then how do I, show them, very obviously that they're choosing not to work for me, that I'm not firing you because I've laid out very fairly how we can be on the same page. And so that led me to a psychology of leadership certification from Cornell. And that's where it just clicked. I mean, all of a sudden I said, I am one of 36 board certified ambulatory care pharmacists in Oklahoma. I can do the clinical stuff. I do like the clinical stuff. I do enjoy diabetes ed, but it really lights me up is the people. How can I get people engaged? Because I say this all the time, but if we want to be providers, we have to look like providers. And you can walk into a community pharmacy today and still today, the pharmacist is doing almost all of the work beyond dispensing. I do believe that COVID vaccinations changed that to some degree. But, even before then, I just feel like the pharmacist is doing the MTM in addition to checking the prescriptions. A pharmacist is trying to find time outside of that schedule to teach diabetes education. The pharmacist is pulling the vaccine, prepping the vaccine, giving the vaccine, everything the pharmacist is doing. And the success here is, how can we engage all of our people so that we can oversee some of the projects but help all of them work at the top of their license? And then you can work on 3, 4, 5, 6 different things at one time, make sustainable progress towards all of them and hitting all of those goals, and do it so people love it. People love coming to work.
Right.
And so just kind of getting it into that mindset, I got to see a lot of, this is why this worked. This is why this didn't work. And then really seeing the psychology behind it has helped me for every, certification or educational path after that. It's really helped me to focus on that so that I can, figure out how we can help those that have really big stumpers. And so, what the hard part is, some people, they don't realize that they have culture problems. And I can't say, hey, you got culture problems, you need to fix it. So
why can't you say that?
It's like saying, hey, you're fat, you need to lose weight. I mean, essentially, it's offensive. They have to come to that realization. And, I can say that all day long, but until they're bought into it, the owner's not going to take my recommendations. And so a lot of times we have to start on something like diabetes or, implementing something into their workflow. And then when they ask, Susan, who's worked there for 35 years, to do something different in her day, and then she blows up, and then someone else blows up, and then they say, oh my gosh, I have culture problems. And then I can say, you don't say, let's work on that.
It's funny. We had, I don't remember who it was, but they were talking about, they weren't implementing a program at their store because one of their technicians had been there forever and she was cranky. And it was like, yeah, that's the problem. Not the fact that you can't implement that program, is that you won't do it because you have one person that's cranky. Right.
Yeah. And I've lived that. I've lived that life where in the early days, I was held hostage by a certain technician. And that happens a lot. That happens to a lot of pharmacists. They don't implement it. They don't want to overcome that. And that's one of the big reasons why I wanted to teach conflict management at NCPA this year, is because if you can work through that conflict, you can really get a lot farther with people. And, I think that when we're diving into some of that conflict management and we're trying to learn a little bit more about employee engagement, pharmacists are nice people. And so they tend to be avoiders, and they tend to just pretend like nothing's wrong. And that doesn't always bode well for us. And, if we look now at how we can get people to show up, I mean, it's so fun for someone to come to me wanting to fire someone, and then we learn, the communication issue, or, someone's just not being heard. And then at the end of the day, the person wants to work there. They're doing a good job. And then the person who wanted to fire them can't believe that this happened. And I keep kind of when I'm having bad days, I keep kind of a collection of the text messages I get,
Nice.
And the other day I was looking through, and, one said, oh my gosh, this person just quit, and it was someone who was bossing them around. I taught them how to do one conversation with this person that would allow them to choose. And it wasn't a hear me roar, I am in charge. It was, let's get on the same page. Let's figure out what your desires really are. I want to tell you what my desires are for the future of this business, and how can we fit you into that puzzle. And they had one conversation with them, and it took 3 days, and the person turned in their notice and they left. I have another one that I was looking at that said, you're not going to believe this, but this person, when we were closing, they filled all the vial drawers and they put printer paper in the printer before we left, and they vacuumed the floor before I could get the alarm set. And, before, they wouldn't even show up to work on time. This is like magic here. What's going on?
Nice.
And it's just trying to figure out, what shows them they're valued. We're all human and we want to be seen.
Right. So I want to go a little off topic, where you were talking about, if you want to be a provider, you should be seen as a provider. And one of the things that I've noticed, and we visit a lot of pharmacies, less now than I'd like, but you walk into a lot of independent pharmacies and they don't look like a place where you'd go visit a provider, right? The biggest, I guess, what they look like is more like a 7-Eleven than a place where you get healthcare. So what do you do about that when you kind of come in and look and say, like, if everybody wants to feel like a provider, do you start with the appearance of their store?
I think you can, but I see people do some pretty phenomenal things in a not so pretty building.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know that you need to change the environment as much as you need to change how your staff engage with them. And I'll be the first to say, both of my buildings are not super pretty. I mean, they were pharmacies for 20 years and 30 years before I bought them, and I have done some remodeling and some painting and stuff. But the insides are a lot nicer than the outsides. I think it has to do with how your team approaches the problem that the patient's bringing in the door. I think that's the first step. And so
I was going to say, I don't think it's necessarily they have to be pretty. I've seen some like really old, super charming pharmacies that have been pharmacies for, 100 years. They look like a pharmacy, right? When you walk in, the people back there look like it would be if you walked into a doctor's office or a dentist office or something like that. Maybe not that sterile, but it looked like the people behind it were professional in doing their job.
Mm-hmm.
And that's more like what I was going for, not necessarily like you have to walk into a pretty sterile white environment.
Mm-hmm.
You just have to walk into a place that feels like a place where you'd get healthcare.
Yeah, and I think as bad as it is, I told you one of my favorite things of being a community pharmacist is the access to care people can get.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that is to a point our downfall also.
Right.
And people don't give you the value that you do because you are so accessible. And I think that's where your people can really help you out. If it's someone besides the pharmacist calling to schedule your appointment, if it's someone besides the pharmacist calling to remind you of your appointment.
Mm-hmm.
I've got one coaching client right now who is wonderful. They gave over 10,000 COVID vaccines. I mean, they're a really big store, and it's a very smart young owner. And I have had the hardest time convincing them to move to the appointment-based model. And I won't out them because the appointment-based model was required for COVID vaccines, but they never used it. Anyone who walked in got a COVID vaccine, and as soon as they popped a vial open, they went to calling anyone and everyone in town to not waste that vial. And we learned a ton as a profession with COVID vaccines because everyone set up that appointment-based model for everything from, an MTM to a diabetes education to maybe it's the sync call. They've been in the hospital and you're just trying to figure out what they're on, what they're not on. It's scheduling that stuff and having them be ready for your phone call. They come in wanting something and saying, yes, we'd love to help you with that. Let me schedule you an appointment. It's a mindset change. They don't see that. And the more that you can kind of separate that out, the more profitable your programs can become as well.
That's super interesting. I'm going to back up to even something else you kind of talked about where you started these new programs. When I'm sure you coach too, not just on team and team building and things like that, but I'm sure you do a fair amount of coaching on like, how do I just stand up a new vaccine program? Right.
Yeah.
I looked at your website. It looked really rich of what you guys do and do for your community. What's your advice for somebody who's like, man, I don't even do them yet, but I want to talk through it with someone?
Yeah, I think that's pretty common. And I think, vaccines are even high level for some folks. Sometimes just making your workflow more efficient, can be a big deal for some of those pharmacies. But, if they were just going to start out and they hadn't done any of that, you talked about our website, becoming a community stakeholder is really important. And that's something that we cannot ever be beat by in a chain pharmacy. They're never going to be shown as a community stakeholder. My location number 3 that we bought, we've had a fairly difficult time growing that location. It's just a really tiny town, and everyone is elderly, so they pass away, and we've had a hard time replacing those folks. And we have done all kinds of stuff. I mean, I'm talking giving away Yeti coolers and flat screen TVs, and can't figure it out. Well, last week we invited a taco truck to come make street tacos, and we offered free tacos for anyone that wanted food. We delivered to the school. We delivered to a senior citizen center. We did this, and we have gotten more just raves out of tacos than we've ever gotten out of, free $50 gift cards and prizes. And it's because people are hungry. They don't have restaurants in the town.
Fair.
It's free food. We ran out of tacos. I mean, we completely ran out. We ran out of food, and we had a ton. I mean, the taco truck did not have any food left in their truck. So I think just showing your community stakeholder, in the city of Sapulpa, where our main store's at, my wife and I also worked to help open a free clinic. And I think that's been pretty awesome because we've got, we've had the free clinic open since 2019, and we've had a tremendous group of physicians who have been helping us out, and they've been seeing patients since then. We only got the pharmacy open a few months ago. It was a lot harder to open a free pharmacy than it was a retail pharmacy. There's a lot more red tape associated with that. But I think doing things like that, in both towns that we practice in, we offer free laundry day right before Thanksgiving, where we'll just be there to help them fold their laundry and stuff, but we also pay for all their laundry that day. So when they come in, and so just different ways that you can give back. And it's only, for me, the community is what supports us. That's why we have our doors open. So why wouldn't we be supporting them? So I think if they want to start a vaccine program, I would start by making sure they are a stakeholder, because it is going to be a totally out of the box idea that they're offering vaccines. Yeah. I think that's where I would start.
That makes total sense, actually.
Yeah, and it fits in line. Through COVID, we talked to a bunch of people, like almost everybody that's been successful in this has had some kind of relationship with public health or, local anything, the Chamber of Commerce, whoever it was, they've had relationships with their community, and all of those things that's what made them successful. Yeah,
I think so. And, I'll go on another tangent here real quick. I kind of touched on this earlier, but what's been really neat is I had the privilege to get on a phone call with a very high commander in the CDC. And honestly, I didn't know what I was walking into. I thought it was just another person wanting to know about diabetes education and how to bill for it. And, we scheduled it, and I didn't prepare anything. I worked the bench for an hour while a pharmacist was out. I came back and sat down on my Zoom, and I started looking and thinking, wow, they're in a really fancy uniform. That looks pretty official,
That's got so many medals. Right.
Yeah, it's really funny. So it's really interesting, but the CDC, and what's fun is I've seen all this happen in my community, but the CDC, they were so thankful for the response of community pharmacists to COVID vaccines. And they said, what other things can community pharmacists do that we could farm out from our local health departments and refer patients? The money is already coming from things like Medicare. So we just need to find out what they're allowed to bill for. It won't cost us anything, but we're going to gain back time and resources because we're going to refer all them to community pharmacies. Well, this conversation started about a month ago. If you rewind about 3 months ago, I've actually seen this play out. My local health department took me to lunch, bought my lunch, wanted to quiz me about how we could bill for diabetes education patients from their office. And, so I've seen them trying to do this. Well, the CDC, the whole point of the call was, hey, we want community pharmacies to be our right-hand man. We want them to be our referral source. However, when we engage a pharmacy to do diabetes education or anything besides COVID vaccines, they're not as interested. We don't have the uptake that we did with COVID vaccines. And so I just immediately said, well, the billing for us is a nightmare.
Yeah.
And even someone who has been an accredited program, who has went through all the extra steps to be a certified diabetes education site, or I could go on, there's a big long list of things,
Right.
What happens, I was telling them, is that, the pharmacy is billing all that stuff on multiple different NPIs and PTAN numbers. And even with the experience we have, using what I consider to be one of the best billing companies there is, because we've tried them all, our numbers still get switched up in rejections, and we have to, go back and say, hey, this PTAN doesn't belong here because that was the PTAN for diabetes education, and you should have used the PTAN for ostomy bags,
Right.
It's all switching it back and forth. And so the CDC says, wow, we didn't know this was a problem. And I said, hey, so this would be fixed. You asked about COVID vaccines. You gave pharmacists the authority to be a provider so that we could prescribe those and we could bill that under our own pharmacist NPI.
Right.
So it cleared out all the background numbers that now you're trying to line up. And I said, that is why it was so much smoother. And I said, if CMS would go ahead and give us limited provider authority and let us use our pharmacist NPI for more things, we would have so many roadblocks removed. So the CDC went to the CMS, and then the CMS is saying, no, there's no problem billing. Look at all these dollars we're paying out to pharmacies. So after a number of conversations, because CDC came back and said, well, here's what they said. And so I said, well, the point they said here contradicts this point, and this point contradicts this, and what they're saying doesn't make sense. I think we need to look into it further. So this has turned into a tremendous project that I feel so fortunate to be a part of. So all of these denials that we get for anything on the medical side,
right,
it gets fixed by our biller or our MAC, our Medicare Administrative Contractor, before CMS ever sees it. So CMS doesn't even know it's a problem for us to bill for all these things. And the MACs, they don't want to pull the denials because they don't want to look like they don't know what they're doing.
Right.
The billers don't want to pull their denials because they don't want to look like they don't know what they're doing. And meanwhile, you have pharmacists who just think they're doing it wrong. That's why they're not getting paid. So then they don't do any of the services. And so it's fast forwarded to now. I've been collecting from anyone I know billing on the medical side. And if anyone's listening to this, you can send this stuff to me at travis@farmfurther.com, PharmFurther. I just need your NPI numbers and the MAC of the locality that you're in. It's all I need. And I'm providing that weekly as an update to Medicare. And Medicare can use that to go into the MAC's records to find these denials, to figure out all the reasons why these numbers get jumped up in the background. And so we're in the data collection phase right now.
Okay.
But if I can show enough people are having problems with this, then it's going to warrant them to have another discussion with me about the provider status and how we could use our NPI as a pharmacist at a pharmacy. And that would be, career changing. That would be a game changer. So I'm very, very excited about that.
Well, that would be the kind of the holy grail that APHA has been going for what, a decade now or more?
Forever. Yeah. And I think that there's more than one way to get there, and we have to be approaching from all the efforts. I was fortunate to sit on another committee for CPESN where we were trying to get paid as pharmacists for the Paxlovid consults.
Yep.
Because with Amina's training that I mentioned earlier, we have pharmacists that work inside physicians' clinics, just like hers, and for the type of review we're doing for Paxlovid consults in the pharmacy, that would be easily a level 3 office visit if a nurse practitioner or a physician's assistant or a physician were doing those visits, because there is clinical decision making. You're reviewing the medication list to look for drug interactions. You're making dose recommendations based on their kidney function. I mean, it's not just we're checking some boxes to make sure that they haven't had steroids in the last 7 days and give them a flu shot. There's real medical decision making happen. So on that committee with CPSN, they were in conversation with Medicare about them paying pharmacists for these services. And, the conversation came up that how much money do you want us to ask for? And, CMS is considering making a whole separate code that's special to pharmacists for Paxlovid consults. Okay. And I said, no, I don't want that. I would take less money if we can use the 99 EMN visit codes just like a physician, because that would be a bigger win for our profession if we could do it that way. And so, they're still in conversations to figure that out. But I think that is the key if we keep pushing this. We were fortunate to get our Medicaid in the state of Oklahoma to start covering diabetes education, which is fascinating. That hasn't been happening. And there are lots of Medicaids that still don't cover it. There are some that do. So ours covers it. But even though we've been an accredited program for years, when they went to enroll us as providers, they ended up having us, they wouldn't create a pharmacist provider profile. We had to apply as a certified diabetes educator and get rejected. And then you reply back to that rejection with your pharmacist license and date and your accreditation certificate for your diabetes education program. And, they're creating themselves more work. They could just make a pharmacist a provider in their system, and we could move on to that. But I do want to get back to people. I think you mentioned a lot of good things on people. I think that people look at immunizations, they look at diabetes education, they look at those dollars. our margins are always crunching right now, as community pharmacists. And so I would love for people to see the opportunity they're missing out on in employee engagement. And we have a ton of statistics because there's a lot of cost that I feel like is wasted. And, if you look at culture, the Gallup poll, they're one of the best ones to kind of rate your culture and stuff. And I mean, they say that when you don't put in the effort on culture, you've got, I believe it's 37% higher absenteeism in your staff.
Oh, wow.
You've got 60% more errors. It is 18% lower productivity, 16% lower profitability. And I mean, that could be huge. If for every $1 million in sales you're doing in revenue, 16%, that's $160,000 in lost opportunities.
That's a lot.
And, further, if you get into that employee engagement, they did a study over 5 years. And over that 5 years, they showed that that stores could add 85% to their revenue lines if they just had good culture and focused on, engaging their employees. And part of the new data I'm going to present at NCPA, it's from a study they completed in 2021, but it actually found that 89% of workers, and the study is it's across a wide range of companies and industries. 89% of workers are spending about 3.5 hours a week on conflict at work. And
Wow.
So, I mean, if you think about that, if you have 10 people, I'm just going on averages here, 10 people that work for your pharmacy, 89%. So 9 people are spending 3.5 hours on conflict that you're paying for. We're at 31.5 hours. So
Yeah.
you have a whole nother full-time technician position that you're paying for and not getting anything out of because people are dealing with conflict. And it's not just people are yelling at each other.
Right.
It's the things we do because we don't want to be yelling. It's the avoiding.
Right.
It's the
Right.
The quiet pettiness. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the pettiness, or no one goes to lunch, because they
Right.
don't want to step on anyone's toes, and then it ends up being 3 o'clock and everyone's mad because
Right.
no one's had lunch. It's little things like that. But there's also fascinating research on how to get people to change, and we're going to talk about that a little bit too. But when you look at asking staff to do something different, you talked about immunizations. So let's get employee stakeholder citizenship. Let's get buy-in from our employees because we don't want to be the one doing all the work. Let's get them to help screen people. Let's get them to help, prep the shot, choose the vaccine. At this point, you can have a technician giving a lot of immunizations depending on where you live at. And would you guys mind if I went into the new research for how to get people to change their mind?
I
Why
would
not?
love it.
Let's do it.
Okay.
Yes.
So this is really neat. So Jonah Berger is the lead researcher on this, and I mean, who doesn't want to change someone's mind, right? You want
I'm in
to,
sales.
Yeah, I mean, that's
tell
Mark's
your-
whole job.
Yeah, you want to convince your spouse to go to dinner where you want to go to dinner,
Right.
right? Or not to go see the mother-in-law on Sunday afternoon. I mean, everyone wants to change someone's mind about something.
But never your mother-in-law.
Never the mother-in-law. She's always right. But the kids,
Yeah.
we got to change their minds occasionally, right? So there's 5 basic aha moments that were in the research that Jonah found, and he kind of starts off with, hey, when we want to change something and change someone's mind, a lot of times we start with the physical world. So if I want to move a chair, I'm going to push a chair and I'm going to push harder until it actually moves, and it's going to move across the room. I'm going to change its physical state. So we associate a lot of how we're going to change someone's mind with the physical state changes. And so, the number one thing he says is don't push harder. We just need to take the parking brake off. So if someone is not wanting to change their mind, let's find out what is holding them up. What is the barrier that they have their brakes on for? And, in one of his books, he goes into if a parking brake is on in a car, we can put it in drive. We can give it more gas. We can turn the wheels, but it's not going to go anywhere, right? Not very fast anyway until we get the parking brake off. So if we try to change someone's mind, we think that if we just add that more information or more good reasons, then they're eventually going to do whatever we ask. But actually what we found is adding more pressure, it only creates more resistance. And so, instead, if we'll work on, thinking about sitting in a car parked on that gentle slope, kind of getting that analogy going. Then when we push harder and harder, it doesn't get anywhere. We can remove those brakes and get barriers to action removed so that the persuasion kind of happens naturally. The car's going to start rolling on the hill when those are off. Number 2 was somewhat related, but it was to reduce basically their reactance, so how they react to the change, by offering a choice. And I experiment all these on my kid and my team as well, right? My team knows that I'm always experimenting and trying new things. They know if I suggest something, it's just kind of me testing the water. It's not so much I'm really going to make the change, but they're wonderful people. So if we're going to reduce the reactance, we need to give them a little bit of freedom of control over our lives. I mean, and I kind of relate this a little bit to salesmen. I mean, when you have a salesman, everyone's guards just go up. The minute the car salesman is walking towards you, you're thinking, we are not buying a car. We are not buying a car.
Yep.
And that kind of comes too from some owners, especially the high level like innovators. A lot of them that I work with, their teams they dread, oh my gosh, what is their next idea going to be? Because it's going to cause more work. And so to disarm those defenses, you can give someone a menu of 2 or 3 options, and some might be worse than others, but they got options and they got a chance to choose a little bit of what they could do. Another big one is just kind of easing their endowment, basically, by pointing out the cost of the status quo. People are just naturally attached to the things that they're already doing, the ideas that they already have. I remember when I bought my very first store, they were still stamping the back of every class 2 narcotic with a red N, and they were still stamping the back of every 3 through 5 with a red C, which was a rule like 25 years ago.
Right.
It's like, what a waste of time to going through all those books and stamping those hard copies. By the way, the prescription number is printing an N or a C, next to the number.
Right.
They couldn't give up that stamp. And so helping them loosen their grip and just show them all the time you're spending on that, the status quo is not really as easy or harmless as we might think. And so if we can make the inconvenience of the change look more appealing than the cost of the inaction, that tends to really help people to kind of change their mind a little bit. And I think pharmacists run into this a lot with patients too, and I use these techniques a lot with the people I coach, try to help them figure out how can we move this person forward. Another one, which it seems simple, but we don't ever do it, is we shrink the distance by asking for less. And so if you're going to start, immunizations was your example earlier, instead of saying, hey, let's give 1,000 immunizations this year, hey, let's start immunizations. Tell me what you think you'd be interested in helping me with, when someone walks in the door wanting one of those. And we hope that if if people of a different political persuasion will suddenly get it, is what we think. And we're immediately going to switch to our side of the ideas. But we got to shrink that distance. So ask for less first, get that to go, and then you can always ask for more later, once it goes well and they see it's not that bad now that we've started.
Yeah.
And once it's like a manageable change, there's a fascinating guy that contributed to this research. He's a physical trainer who was like a bodybuilder, and he had an accident and he's paralyzed now. And so he had to figure out how to be a personal trainer and make a living sitting in a wheelchair, not being able to show people how to do the workout. And, one thing that he has really gotten into is the psychology behind behaviors and how people show up to act. And, one thing that he has started is, let's get the routine of you showing up to the gym. So I want you to come and I want you to work out for 5 minutes. And you can choose. Is it 3 days a week, 4 days a week, whatever you choose, we're going to do every week. And once you're coming for 5 minutes every single week, 3 times a week, now I can add on 5 more minutes and it's not that big a deal to you.
Right.
And then I can add on 5 more minutes. And so just kind of getting to start. And then, the number 5 is just alleviate uncertainty by lowering the barrier, basically, to whatever you're going to trial. And I always, I quote a lot of different authors, so I love to read just organizational psychology. But Jim Collins always says, don't ever tell people how you're going to get there. Always tell them where you're headed.
Right.
And I think that's part of that lowering that barrier to the trial is, hey, guys, we're going to try this for a little while. Here's where we're trying to get. That's where we're headed. And what we're about to change in workflow may or may not work, and I might change my mind tomorrow, but we're gonna try it and see how it works. And I think getting that combination, I told you about employee engagement. I think there's a quote I really like that says if a child is poor in math and good at tennis, most people would hire a math tutor, but I would rather hire a tennis coach. That's from the 9 Lives of Work. We think everyone needs to be cross-trained and diverse, but the research now shows if they call it, I think they call it pointy in the book. We want to lean into people's pointiness. How can we lean into their strengths? But if you can figure out what their strengths are, if you can understand what makes them show up their best self. Another quote is kind of interesting that I think helps people show up their best self. But if you want to say that learning, can only happen when a child is interested, is kind of where the quote comes from. If he's not interested in what you're trying to teach them, and I see this in my own kid, it's like throwing marshmallows at their head and calling it eating. And that's a lot of what's going on in our pharmacies today. We come in from a conference like Connect or NCPA, and oh my gosh, I learned about this great new service we're going to offer, and they don't even know if they're interested in hearing what you have to say or not. Tell them what's in it for them. Lower that barrier to trial. We see that a lot of times with email, right? You get however many gigabytes for free, right? And then you fall in love with it, and it says, hey, we're going to start charging you 99 cents because you've outgrown your storage. Or Dropbox is another one.
Dropbox did that.
You've outgrown it. And those are examples that Jonah gives. But if you can get people to show up their best selves, and you can use these barriers to change and try to help motivate them, and then people can choose how they're going to show up. And I would say another thing is people kind of get stuck in a plan. And almost everyone that works for me today would probably tell you that what they're doing for me today is not at all what they thought they were hired for.
Right.
But it's
that's kind of the Pioneer motto, right?
That's what happens here too.
Happens all the time. Yeah, Pioneer. Yeah, absolutely. I talked to 4 or 5 different Pioneer employees at the convention, at the conference you guys had, and hey, I haven't heard from you in a while. And they say, oh, well, I'm doing this now for the company, and it's like, oh, do you like that? And they said, well, you know what? I actually love it. It's actually pretty good. I really like that, and so that's the key is I am a pharmacist who loves to be a pharmacist, but I spend all my days, coaching. I love the employee engagement and get people to show up their best self and ultimately just move pharmacy forward by doing that.
Gosh, that's really good. So you're teaching, we kind of glossed over it, but you're teaching a boot camp at NCPA, correct? In this coming October. What date are you doing? Like, I just want to tell everybody who's listening or who listens to this and watches it, when is that?
Yeah. So I actually started that boot camp through Farm Further. Okay. And was doing that very successfully. And then NCPA, they used to do a program, I think it was called DAPSA or something similar to that. It was another boot camp they used to do, and that company's kind of fallen out, and they haven't been able to perform the last few years. And so brainstorming with them, diabetes education is one of the clinical ways we can be seen as an office visit type person, a physician, if you will. Right. And so I had said, hey, we really need to get more pharmacies accredited for this. And I've been teaching this class. I have it down to 6 weeks. People can spend 6 weeks with me and have the accreditation done. And when I went through it, it took me 11 months, to figure it out by myself. And so they come for a week, and then I teach for an hour, and then they have a week to do the homework that I assign. Okay. And then they come another week and they teach for an hour, and then they have another week to do the homework that I assign. And I start the beginning of the weeks with the projects that are going to take longer for them, so that by the end of the 6 weeks they can be done. And so NCPA said, hey, yes, we need to be getting more people accredited. Would you be willing to take the program you've already designed and teach that for us? And it's been a phenomenal relationship. NCPA has been wonderful to work with. We have found, even umbrella opportunities to go into to help people kind of get up to the next level. And people have got so much opportunity knocking at their door in community pharmacy, depending on the state they live in, depending on what MAC they have, what commercial payers are interested in their area. People are really starting to see the value of the pharmacist. And so now it's been so successful, I now exclusively teach that boot camp through NCPA. Okay. And we've been teaching 3 or 4 a year based on, outcomes and whatever other projects we have going on. We guarantee 3 a year. And so I have a class that just graduated, and then I offer free office hours afterwards once a week to help them work through any implementation barriers, that are really unique. And then I teach them how to set up a very profitable program in those 2 weeks after they're accredited and all that's done, how to actually do the education by using 2 hours a week. If you can just give me 2 hours a week to do patient appointments, I can make you $560 an hour for Medicare.
Oh, nice.
Just 2 hours a week.
That's the group rate, right? That's
the group rate. Yeah. You can educate 20 people at a time. And so it's a very good program, and you get a bill on the provider side. Your provider's in your town, so you as a provider.
Right.
Our next class is going to launch on October the 12th.
Okay.
And so, it's also been fun for me because people can get a taste of me in a very, rigid curriculum where I have a very proven process, and then they can decide if they want to do other coaching opportunities with me. I'm always willing to hear an idea, but I'll be the first one to tell you if I'm not the expert. If they come to me and say, I want help with this, I'm very different from most business coaches because I'll be the first to say, I think that's important and you need to work on that. That is not something that I'm either interested in or it's not something that I know a lot about. You need to go talk to Benjamin Jolly, or you need to go talk to Amina Babakar.
Right.
You need to go to the other subject matter experts. And, or, maybe it's something that I don't do, but I know a little bit about and I would like to dabble in it. And so I'll just flat out say, tell you what, I'm going to help you with this. I don't know a lot about it. I'm going to help you for free. I'm not going to charge you because it's going to be a learning process for me as we go. And some of my probably more fun projects have been those where we've tried something crazy and we can't believe how well it works.
That's so great. Well, shoot, man. I think we filled it up.
Yep.
Well, Travis, man, thanks so much for coming on. A couple things. Can you say your email real quick?
Yeah, Travis@farmfurther.com.
Yep.
PHARMFURTHR. And then one other thing I wanted just to do a plug for real quick.
Let's do it.
I'm only one person and my coaching schedule stays, completely full. So I have created some free resources and a free weekly coaching tip. People can go to group.farmfurther.com, GROUP.farmfurther.com. It's going to ask a few questions about you and your pharmacy because I'm trying to figure out what problems you're trying to solve. It's not that I'm going to call you and try to sell to you. But if they'll just answer those 2 or 3 questions, they will get access to some free implementation guides I've designed. Nice. They'll get access to, I have a quick start to employee engagement because it's really helpful for me if you'll go try those 3 or 4 things first before you ever get to my coaching. And we can hit the ground running and get results quicker. So if group.farmfurther.com, and then every week I put additional information and, hey, I had a coaching client dealing with this, and I think everyone deals with this at some point. So here's the research I found, and here's how you can apply this to your workflow. If it's interesting to you, let me know. I'll send you the articles and the research and the plan. So I'm able to reach a lot of people that way. Yeah. So if anyone is, and some people are afraid to ask for help too. They don't have bad culture. So they can come and they can dabble, and then I'll have some that'll message me and say, oh my gosh, I can't believe this article that you have. This hits the nail on the head for me. This is totally my problem right now. I didn't see it. And I can meet them where they're at without them having to, sit on the waiting list for coaching too long.
Right.
So.
Right. Nice, man. Also, remember the other thing you reached out, you were telling people to reach out to you about the CMS issue.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. I still need that data. I've got, the ironic thing is when I initially had the first conversation, I initially asked pharmacists, and I had over 100 responses of people that said, yes, we have problems billing medical. And then 2 weeks later, I said, all right, I got their attention. I need your NPI and your MAC. And then crickets. Oh. I had 7 or 8 people. So there are some of them are my coaching clients. And I've called and I've said, why don't you want to give your information? And I could go look up their NPI if I wanted to. Right. But I want their permission because they might get contacted by Medicare. And I want them to know what's going on. And here's the really sad thing about it is it has become so hard for us to get paid that by the time the pharmacist deals with the MAC and the biller, they're convinced that they are the problem. Oh. And that I billed something incorrectly and it's my fault. I did it wrong. And so I'm embarrassed and I don't want to be vulnerable. I don't want anyone looking at my NPI because it was all my own mistake. And so I've had a lot bigger battle than I thought I would, trying to convince people that it's not you. You're doing everything right. It's the system that's set up, and I need to prove that to people. So I've already sent the first collection of data with the agreement that I would add to it every week with anyone else that came forward. So I'm still giving them information. So anyone that has anything built on the medical side. It doesn't have to be diabetes education. It can be COVID vaccines.
Right.
Monoclonal antibodies are really interesting because those were also built with a pharmacist NPI, just like COVID vaccines.
Okay.
But they're not getting paid for. Anyone who has the DME POS accreditation, so if they're billing for walkers and wheelchairs and ostomy bags, I think it's interesting. We do diabetic shoes at my store too.
Okay.
We had to send someone to a certified shoe fitter orthotics class to get certification for that, but they can't bill under an orthotics NPI because they're also a pharmacist. We have to bill under the pharmacy. So, anyone who has anything that they think they should be getting paid for, they have problems with, or maybe they've figured out how to get paid, but it always comes back at least once or twice. I just need the NPI number and the MAC that you're in. That's all I need. And then Medicare will go find all the information for us.
Great. Well, good deal. All right. Well, I think that wraps us up. Travis, thanks so much for jumping on with us. We learned so much. I feel like I've learned so much just about people and teams and team dynamics and staff engagement. Man, I know you could teach a lot. So, again, thank you for everything you do for pharmacy as well. And thanks for jumping on.
Yeah, I appreciate you guys too, and appreciate the opportunity to be here. And I think we all need to be a little bit more like Pioneer. I love how we get to vote ideas up or down. If we could do that as a profession, we might actually move forward faster too, because we could all, have a consensus and agree on things that we want to do. So anyway, let's do this again. I really enjoyed it.
Yes, sir.
All right. Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
See you, Travis.
Thank you for watching the Catalyst Pharmacy Podcast.
If you enjoyed today's episode,
Please like, subscribe, and follow us wherever you get your podcast.
Give us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts to help us reach more pharmacy professionals like you.